None? Okay. Representative Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shayne, the problem with 422 corridor expansion, it seems to me, was that every time we talk about that, we always end up in King of Prussia, and somebody says, but the Schuylkill Expressway really doesn't have a plan to expand. So, essentially, we would be moving the bottleneck. If we expand the 422 corridor right now, we move the bottleneck down into King of Prussia and make it essentially worse as you enter the Schuylkill Expressway. What kind of plans, somebody must be working on plans to coordinate some expansion of the Schuylkill Expressway, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to move the bottleneck 5 miles down the road.
Certainly, and not every car that's coming on 422 is getting on the Schuylkill Expressway also. They're getting on the Turnpike and they're going east to Fort Washington to Plymouth Meeting. They're getting on US 202 and going south to Great Valley to Chesterbrook. So there is a dispersion of cars that is kind of hitting the bottleneck at the Schuylkill Expressway that's not going to continue on. But the biggest proposal is to restore passenger rail. Currently, if you're commuting along the 422 corridor, your only option is to get in your car and drive to your destination. So if you are going to Philadelphia, the only way to get there is essentially to drive. By expanding passenger rail, you take a portion of those vehicles off the road, which will intend to alleviate congestion on the Schuylkill Expressway, but also move it from 422 and give you that direct path into Philadelphia. It's actually, 422 is one of the few corridors in our region that doesn't have any kind of passenger rail or commuter rail service. So that part of that you would see that happen there. But ultimately, yeah, our whole highway network has to be evaluated for how do you expand it, how do you improve it, and how do you get cars off of that road.
Thank you.
Shayne, talking about the rail, coming from Central PA, it's like any part probably the country. It depends where you're at as to whether commuter rail works. It's kind of one of those things whether you will use it. Have you done your organization or any other organizations done a survey as to whether because the biggest, most expensive project you mentioned was the commuter rail, that it really people will utilize it to the fullest extent? Because when you talk about all the other projects that you mentioned, I think you said it was a total of $1 billion. All the projects were, a $500 million, and commuter rail was a $500 million. So the question I have for you is, if you're going to do the commuter rail, have you done working with those individuals who now commute via car, whether they truly would fully utilize that kind of an expensive project?
Certainly, and the corridor has been studied extensively over the past 15 years to restore passenger rail. And as part of those studies, ridership counts have been looked at. However, they're estimates. There hasn't been passenger rail service on this corridor for over 25 years, so to compare it to anything is very difficult. However, there have been a number of studies done to look at that. And it does move a portion of the traveling public. Is it a significant portion? Well, then you start getting into the choices that commuters make broadly, and it's not just 422, but it's as a commuter in any region, how do you choose to travel to your destination?
Well, I'm just familiar with the region because I've drove through it, of course, many times. But there is bus service now provided by SEPTA in that region.
Correct. There is bus service that runs up along Ridge Pike, which travels from Norristown west to Pottstown, and it's essentially the surface arterial that is parallel to 422. And then in Chester County, there's the Route 139 that departs from King of Prussia, and then more or less parallels 422 to Limerick. So there is bus service. However, it's infrequent and it's not as comfortable or as desirable as a commuter rail service would be.
The reason I ask that is, of course, everybody in the central part of the state would like commuter rail from Harrisburg to Baltimore. And right now what we've been doing as projects has been using the bus lines for regular direction, both directions. And they've been, each year they're continuing to grow in the number of buses and demand for buses to do that. I guess my concern would be in any time where you're investing $500 million in a rail project versus busing is to make sure when you're investing that kind of money in a project that they will truly take their cars off the road. I would suggest maybe looking, again, this is central Pennsylvania view here, I don't know if it works here in the southeast, is expanding your bus service first, because if you're going to build the rail service eventually, then you could eliminate the bus service if you ever do get it. But I think to spend that kind of project and then find that people would not use commuter rail, I would be concerned about. I think a lot of people want it. The question is, are they willing to sacrifice? I personally wish I could take a bus to Harrisburg when I have to go to Harrisburg, because I get a lot more work done. But it doesn't work within the hours as most of us as legislators. But just curious, because that's one of the things I think is very important as we change the way we do projects and put projects out there, is that we see that they're fully utilized. I think P3s are great projects. I think that I can't believe we still haven't done them in the state, but they're not going to work, as we heard earlier, for every project.
Correct.
So, that's the only thing I have to say on that. So thank you for your testimony.
And the 422 corridor has, I mean, aside from the rail, the highway has also been, that would be an excellent P3 project, because it would take a large portion of the problem from PennDOT and put it into the hands of the people that are using it, and make them responsible for their own improvements. So.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shayne.